Good morning. In January of this year, I reminded the board I had been presenting the monthly financial services report for the past 7 years. After that many years and numerous reports, I thought it was time for a change, a new perspective. So on a rotating basis, I started having others give the bulk of the monthly board report. Along those same lines, this is my 8th annual meeting financial report. Again, probably time for something different and a new perspective. So rather than going it alone, joining me on stage at various times this morning to participate in presenting the financial report are Katrina Wald, Vice President and Controller, Sue Sorensen, Vice President and Treasurer, and Brian Matthews, Vice President and Chief Information Officer. Katrina may be a new face to many of you, as she's a newbie by Basin standards, joining the cooperative in January of 2016. Katrina will provide an update on our 2020 financial results and associated audit, as well as our September year-to-date financial results.
Thank you, Steve. We'll get started out with the audit. We engaged Deloitte, as we have for many years now, to conduct the independent audit of Basin Electric's and its subsidiaries' 2020 financial statements. However, the audit was very different than in years past, in that it was done entirely on a remote basis. This meant Zoom calls, screen sharing, and emailing became the main modes of communication. Now, that's quite a bit different than having an in-person conversation. At times, this made the audit process a bit challenging. But we have a great team that is always ready for a challenge and that is willing and able to step up to the plate. I am so honored to work with such a talented and dedicated team. As a result, we are pleased to report that for 2020, as in years past, Deloitte issued clean or unmodified audit opinions for the consolidated Dakota Coal Company and Dakota Gasification Company financials, as well as the Basin Electric consolidated financials. The Basin Electric consolidated financials, complete with the notes to the financial statements, are included in the 2020 annual report, which was published earlier this year. The annual report, along with the 2021 quarterly consolidated financial statements, is available on the Basin Electric website. Let's start with a quick summary of the 2020 financial results before we get into this year's results to date. Basin Electric ended the year with $7.6 billion in assets on a consolidated basis. Consolidated net margins and earnings were $75 million, down slightly from $77 million in 2019. The 2020 results include the deferral of an additional $109 million of surplus sales revenue, with a deferred revenue balance ending December 31st, 2020 at $264 million. In 2020, Basin Electric recorded $1.6 billion of member sales and $17 million of non-member sales. This is after the deferral of surplus sales revenue. To minimize risk associated with COVID and for the safety of employees, limited contractors were brought on site and plant outages were delayed, resulting in lower operations and maintenance expenses in 2020. Moving on to Dakota Gas. Dakota Gas recorded a net loss of $95 million. This compares to a net loss of $71 million in 2019. Revenue was down significantly from 2019 as a result of low commodity prices. Finally, Dakota Coal had a net profit of around $1 million, in spite of coal sales being down as a result of less tons being delivered. Now let's look at the cooperative's 2021 year-to-date unaudited financial results through September. Electricity sales for the first 9 months of 2021 to Basin Electric's members were 20.5 million megawatt hours, generating $1.3 billion of revenue. This represents a $60 million increase in revenue and a 5% increase in megawatt hour sales and revenue from the same period last year. Basin Electric managed the Winter Storm Uri in February fairly well as a result of our diversified generation portfolio, along with the other tools that were used during this time to mitigate risk. For example, the amortization of deferred revenue. You will hear more about this during a panel discussion this afternoon. The weather event resulted in higher surplus sales revenue of approximately $210 million, as Basin was able to capture high market prices for its surplus sales, Included in surplus sales is the aforementioned $34 million of deferred revenue that was amortized into surplus sales revenue in the first quarter of 2021. The deferred revenue balance now sits at $230 million. Conversely, operations and maintenance expenses increased $287 million during the first 9 months of 2021 compared to 2020. And this is mainly due to higher purchase power and increased fuel expenses associated with the winter weather event. Maintenance expenses are up this year due to the plant outages that were deferred from 2020. The net loss for DGC for the first 9 months of 2021 was $16 million. This is a tremendous improvement from 2020 when the net loss was $89 million through the first 9 months. And pricing is a strong driver in the improvement. Revenue is almost $130 million higher than last year. The largest increases come from S&G, synthetic natural gas, fertilizers, and diesel exhaust fluid, or DEF. Average S&G prices are more than double last year's prices, and recently, natural gas spot prices have been in the $5 range. While the sales volumes for fertilizers are lower than last year, the prices are significantly higher, with urea prices close to 60% higher, and ammonia approximately 35% higher. And for diesel exhaust fluid, or DEF, sales volumes have been stellar, 90% higher than last year, and pricing is better than last year too. DGC's marketing partnership with N7 is paying dividends. DGC was able to fill in and meet sales commitments for DEF sales when our partner in N7 and others were in extended turnarounds. On the expense side, operating expenses are up $49 million. That's primarily due to higher electricity costs during the weather event. When considering the costs that are truly controllable by the plant, expenses are fairly comparable to last year and are lower than budgeted amounts. For Dakota Coal, net income of $16 million is $16 million higher than last year at this time. This is mostly due to lower coal revenue and lower costs at the mine. And just a shout out to Coteau as they continue to do a great job of cost containment at the mine. To conclude, on a consolidated basis, for the first 9 months of 2021, the net margins and earnings of Basin Electric and its subsidiaries were $185 million, compared to a budget of $106 million and a net margin of $117 million last year. Thank you. Now I'll turn it back over to Steve for some information on the financial forecast.
Now that we've looked at the past, I want to spend just a few minutes looking forward. On a consolidated basis, our 2022 to 2031 financial forecast shows net margins and earnings of approximately $75 million per year. I should also note that we fully expect to build our deferred revenue pool to $300 million, possibly even by the end of this year. And we expect to maintain that balance through 2023, as approved by you, our members, at the 2018 annual meeting. But the good news doesn't stop there. Even with holding rates constant, we're projecting sizable margins. We will look to use those margins to get our balance sheet in order, again, as requested by you, the membership. Things we'll evaluate include the acceleration of the deferred regulatory asset associated with the impairment of DGC's gas assets at the end of 2018, as well as the acceleration of the depreciation on some of our fossil fuel generating stations. I would like to remind everyone, however, that just because we may accelerate the depreciation of some of those units doesn't mean those units will be retired earlier than currently projected. I would also like to remind everyone, as I did last year, now that we're FERC jurisdictional, we'll need to work with the Commission to get the approval of any regulatory plan we may develop. We'll now turn to our Vice President and Treasurer, Sue Sorensen, who will discuss liquidity, our member investment program, and a few other timely topics.
Thank you, Steve. It's my absolute pleasure to have the opportunity to be here with you today. Cash is king. It is an economic and financial mantra etched into the finance minds since long before I was running barefoot across the dirt fields as a kid in northern North Dakota where I grew up. Cash is king. It will remain a steadfast truth taken into consideration prior to making every economic decision for many more decades to come. One of the strengths Basin Electric is especially proud of is our financial stability and access to liquidity. Whether that liquidity comes from tapping the long or short-term markets, the member investment program, or cash generated and safely invested to have on hand when we need it most. Liquidity can be thought of simply as access to cash. Cash to pay our bills to meet the needs of our growing membership, every minute of every day. Cash to invest in additional resources and infrastructure to meet the growing demand of our membership. Cash to remain compliant with the increasing environmental requirements. Cash to distribute patronage from prior years to our membership. And cash to make payments on the debt that we owe to our bankers and to our investors. Liquidity. It's key to continued growth, service, and overall financial strength. Knowing this, Basin Electric focuses on maintaining strong liquidity position. The rating agencies point to liquidity as one of our top strengths, right up there with strong membership and wholesale power contracts. Liquidity comes in many forms. One of those forms is the member investment program. The member investment program has provided liquidity to Basin Electric for years and continues to be a mutual benefit to our members who can pool their investments with fellow cooperative members to achieve a higher rate of return. Meanwhile, providing liquidity, a stable source of liquidity, to Basin Electric. We thank you, our members, for your continued support of the member investment program and look forward to many more years of serving your investment needs. And if you want to hear more about the member investment program, please reach out to us. It would be our pleasure, and we'd be happy to discuss your new or your existing participation in the program. Another form of liquidity is through access to the debt markets, whether those are short-term or long-term debt markets. Just as the member investment program is built on relationships and mutual benefit with our members, access to debt markets stands on the foundations of years of relationships with our bank group. Without the commitment, the relationship, and the support of our banks, our success in maintaining access to liquidity through the debt markets would be far less a topic to brag about. It's a biased opinion, but our bankers, several who are with us today, are best in class. And Basin Electric will continue to build on this foundation with these relationships for years to come. It truly is a partnership with a common goal, and Basin Electric couldn't be where it is today without the banks navigating the path alongside of us. As it relates to access to capital, you have heard throughout the past few years, and specifically from Todd's message this morning, that the emphasis on ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, is an increasing consideration not just for Basin Electric in the way that we serve our members, but in our ability to access the debt markets and maintain a solid A credit rating. Investors and rating agencies alike are placing more and more emphasis on Basin's impact to the environment by placing measures on carbon output and fossil fuel generation reductions. Taking care of the environment is not new to us. It's something we've always done. Our very roots and livelihoods are in the land and water of the service territory, as rural America is built on the shoulders of the farmers and ranchers who understand the delicate balance between sustainability and growth. Investors want to know also that we are good citizens. This is represented by the S, social, and ESG. For cooperatives, this is the easy one. The very foundation on which a cooperative is built is to work together to improve the individual and collective lives of those served by providing access to a product or a service that would otherwise be inaccessible or unaffordable. We contribute to the growth and the continued viability of the communities that we serve, and we strengthen rural America. It's what we do. It's what we've always done. The last focus of ESG is G, governance. In my, of course, unbiased opinion, the cooperative model represents the epitome of governance. As our governing body, our board of directors is the combined voices of our members, as elected by our members, of equal voice and influence. But the governance culture doesn't stop with our board of directors. It carries through to each employee who takes great pride in representing the members and the communities we serve by maintaining a steadfast grip on the values and character of the cooperative mission. We always have, and we always will. But money comes at a cost. As well-positioned as Basin Electric is with our robust liquidity, support of the membership, partnerships with our banks, solid credit ratings from our 3 rating agencies, accomplishments to point to with ESG, there are still economic impacts lingering that could cause Basin Electric to adjust course. As Basin continues to focus on the needs of the membership on the long term, we also need to make decisions today to best meet those needs in the future. One of the primary economic impacts we are watching, and you just heard it from our keynote speaker, along with the rest of America and the world, is inflation. We know inflation is a leading indicator of the cost of money. Where inflation goes, interest rates, both long and short term, are sure to follow. So inflation continues as it continues to trend upward and proves not to be just a short-term phenomenon driven by temporary bounce recovery from the global pandemic. We watch for the inevitable gravitational pull the repeated high inflation marks month after month will have on interest rates. Those are the interest rates we pay for the additional debt that we need to procure to invest in our members' needs well into the future. We will remain committed to achieving the lowest cost debt source, whether that source is by cash, by the member investment program, or through the debt markets. We'll make wise investment decisions for our members. We'll continue to nurture the relationships that have brought us to where we are today. We'll continue to be stewards of the environment while remaining steadfast in our commitment to rural America. And by contributing to the strength of the communities and the individuals that we serve, and abiding by the governance and the guidance of our membership. Let me now turn it back to Steve to tell you a little bit more about our story.
Both Todd and Sue briefly mentioned the rating agencies. The last face-to-face, albeit virtual meetings we had with them were in July. At that time, Fitch indicated that per their internal guidelines, they didn't need to conduct a formal review of the Basin credit until February of next year. Nonetheless, during our meeting with them, they noted our deferred revenue pool and associated designation of cash, our continued controlling of costs, along with the various strategies being developed for DGC as key credit strengths. Meanwhile, S&P affirmed both our short and long-term ratings, as well as our stable outlook after the July meeting. They too were interested in the potential paths being studied for DGC, along with noting our strong margins and financial metrics as key credit strengths. Finally, just a couple of weeks ago, Moody's announced it had completed its formal review of the Basin credit. As we fully expected, they too affirmed our short and long-term ratings, along with a stable outlook. Not unlike the other agencies, Moody's noted our exposure to the volatility of commodity prices as a risk, while our size relative to our peers, our strong liquidity position, and the likelihood of Basin maintaining strong financial results were all noted as credit positives. One of the highlights of delivering the financial report the last few years has been announcing the retirement of capital credits. This year is no exception. Just yesterday, the board approved the retirement of $34.5 million of patronage. With this distribution, all capital credits through the year 2004 will have been retired. Over the course of just the past 5 years, the Basin board has approved the distribution of nearly $154 million of capital credits. I now want us to totally switch gears for a few minutes. It seems like it's virtually impossible to get through a day without reading or hearing a news story dealing with cyber attacks. Basin Electric is inundated on a daily basis with attempted attacks. I want the manager of our IT division, Brian Matthews, to spend a few minutes talking about the actions Basin is taking to stay ahead of the perpetrators, as well as talking about a few cyber war stories, if you will, that others have experienced.
Thanks, Steve. If you have a computer, a tablet, or a mobile phone, you are likely aware of a constant barrage of attempts to get your data, your money, or both. According to CrowdStrike, a cybersecurity technology company, cybercrime has increased 400% since 2019. This is in part due to a significant increase in the number of individuals attempting cybercrimes and the availability of sophisticated tools needed to commit such acts. In IT, we're familiar with terms like software as a service, where we can access software online via a subscription rather than buying the software and installing it on our computers, like Microsoft Office 365. Well, ransomware as a service is now a reality. Anyone can pay for a subscription to access and use powerful ransomware tools as easily as you and I can pay for Office 365 for our home PCs. This effectively means anyone with a little technical know-how can steal your data and try to make you pay a ransom to get it back. I want to touch on a couple examples that happened in the past 12 months. The first is New Cooperative, a grain cooperative in Fort Dodge, Iowa. In September of 2021, the cooperative disclosed that they had been hit by a ransomware attack that locked up computers, and the cyber criminals threatened to publish a terabyte of New Cooperative's data they claimed to have stolen unless New Cooperative paid a ransom of approximately $5 million. The next example is JBS USA, part of JBS Foods, which is one of the largest food companies in the world. In June of 2021, a cyber attack resulted in the closure of all 9 of the company's beef packing plants in the US. Operations in JBS's plants in Australia were also affected. JBS paid the cyber criminals approximately $11 million to unlock their systems and prevent their data from being released. And of course, there was the ransomware attack that Colonial Pipeline encountered in May of this year that resulted in the halting of all of Colonial Pipeline's operations that typically move over 100 million gallons of fuel every day across an area spanning from Texas to New York. This attack resulted in the company paying almost $5 million to the cyber criminals. What can be done to prevent these types of attacks, especially since they are relatively simple to attempt? In almost every case, one of the main methods used by cyber criminals to gain access to an organization like New Cooperative, JBS, and Colonial Pipeline is to look for known passwords online. Cyber criminals depend on people recycling their passwords across many different websites and applications. Lists of usernames, email addresses, and passwords can be easily purchased on the dark web, and it's a simple process from there to try these lists against other websites and internet-facing devices. Because having good password hygiene is so important, Basin continues to require certain standards for passwords, and we provide education to help prevent the recycling of passwords by staff. Having unique passwords for every login you have is impossible to track in your head. So you need a way to manage all of your passwords. Some people opt for a notebook to write all their passwords into, while others may use a password manager, either within their web browser or a standalone app like 1Password or LastPass. These are applications that store and encrypt your passwords using a common password and simplify gaining access when you need to log into a system. Some organizations require the use of passphrases. These are a string of words used to gain access. Because there are more characters used in a passphrase versus a password, it can help protect against tools that just run through all combination of characters at 1,000 times a second. The last item I'll talk about relating to the protection of passwords is multi-factor authentication. What this does is require a thing you know, like a password, with at least one thing you have, like a phone, or one thing you are, like a fingerprint or facial scan, to gain access. By requiring more than just a password or passphrase, it increases the difficulty of accessing an account by a cybercriminal. By being a more difficult target, cybercriminals are more likely to move along to someone who is easier to exploit. We know this, so multi-factor authentication is another tool in our bag to help protect our IT systems. Other steps organizations should take are identifying any systems accessible from the internet and making sure they are updated and patched frequently. This can be a considerable amount of work depending on how many systems one may have exposed. Just one small system unpatched with the right vulnerability could be the equivalent of leaving the door to your home wide open. It is this level of effort that continues to increase, ensuring any surfaces exposed are monitored and protected by our team. All organizations should also identify critical data and isolate it. This could be financial documents, personally identifiable information, including social security number, birth date and birthplace, medical records and information, account numbers, etc. At Basin, we have a number of initiatives centered on exactly this, protecting our most valuable data assets and ensuring their integrity for our business operations. This is a monumental task with terabytes of data being produced every day at Basin. This is why it is imperative that our team in information systems and telecommunications works closely with Basin's Security Operations Center staff to provide a holistic approach in protecting our systems and data. I would like to personally thank our members and our staff for their diligent efforts to help keep our systems and data secure. The volume of resources, like time, staffing, and dollars required for these tasks can seem overwhelming. So thank you for your help. Lastly, I wanted to cover the importance of education. We spend a considerable amount of time training staff on topics like identifying phishing emails, proper use of removable media at work, password hygiene, how to secure their mobile devices, the dangers of using public Wi-Fi, what information not to post on social media, and of course, reporting any suspicious emails. This education and the practicing of these techniques creates what I call a human firewall, protecting an organization against unrelenting attempts to gain access to data and then money. I'm sure you can plainly see that ransomware and cybercrime is not going away. We need to stay vigilant and make sure we stay focused on maintaining our IT infrastructure, identifying and securing critical data, and implementing good password techniques for every person, every login. This is where you, our member owners, can help us. Please ensure that you are not recycling passwords and you are taking steps to prevent your credentials from being easily obtained. Additionally, as we implement more security measures, it will require more steps to do some things. Thank you for your understanding and patience. Unfortunately, given the technology-driven world we live in, it probably isn't a matter of if we'll be attacked, but when. Steve?
As I mentioned earlier, Katrina's a new face to many of us, as we're used to seeing Sean Dice in the role of Vice President and Controller. Sean, who joined Basin in November of 1987, has decided to retire. In fact, tomorrow is actually her last official day in the office. Sean, on behalf of Basin, I want to thank you for your dedication and contribution to Basin's success. You have truly been an asset for the past 34 years. Personally, I want to thank you for your friendship and support and wish you the very best in retirement. Enjoy those grandkids. At the start of this presentation, I spoke about a new and different perspective. But in closing, I'm going to stay with the tried and true and close the financial report as I have a number of times in the past. So for the last time under my watch, I can proudly report that in the opinion of management and with the concurrence of the board, Basin Electric is in extremely sound financial condition and stands ready to meet the needs of you, our members, now and for years to come. On behalf of myself, Katrina, Sue, Brian, and the rest of the financial services team, thank you.